Okay, everybody. So for your next project, we're going to build on the digital concentration, and we are going to take what you learned from your digital concentration, and we are going to incorporate a new tool, which is the X-Acto blade, your X-Acto knife tool. So just as a safety caveat, the X-Acto knife is basically like a little scalpel, and you can very much hurt yourself with it. So you want to make sure that you do all of your cutting in a safe manner. So I always remind students to not cut on their knees, like don't put paper on your knee and then cut it. Don't try to cut with your X-Acto knife while watching something on YouTube. You really want to pay attention to the knife and the blade. The way that the knife functions is that there are replaceable blades that go in the top. You'll see at the top of your knife, depending on the model, usually there's some type of grip that has a texture. And then if you turn it clockwise or counterclockwise, it actually adjusts these little springs in there. Well, they're not springs, pardon me, these clamps that clamp down on the knife blade or release the knife blade. The biggest trick I would tell you is just that, like, when you're using your X-Acto knife, if you break the tip of your blade, replace it. You have a little packet of blades, and they're very inexpensive if you go through them. If you use your cutting mat and you don't apply tons of pressure to the very tip, it won't break very often. But when it does break, go ahead and replace it so that you get good, clean cuts. Now, just a note there about the cutting mat, you have a self-healing cutting mat for this purpose. And so you want to use that cutting mat when you're cutting your Bristol paper that you are going to be using for this assignment. Don't cut on a piece of cardboard or a piece of glass. All those things are going to break the blade. Um, and the cutting mat is designed for this. So place the cutting mat on a table and then carefully use the knife to cut on the cutting mat. I teach printmaking. I work with students who are using acid, and the acid is hot enough that it etches metal. And students rarely ever hurt themselves with acid because they're really afraid of it. But I have students every quarter hurt themselves with X-Acto knives because they don't think it's that big of a deal. And the reality is that it's one of the most dangerous tools in your kit. So in fact, this quarter, it's the most dangerous tool in your kit. So you're going to be using your cutting board. You're going to be using, your cutting mat, your X-Acto knife, and then some Bristol. And what we are going to be creating are these hand-cut concentration structures. So here's an example here of a student's work from last quarter. And you can see that the quality of the materials matter. So we're going to talk a little bit about the painting of the Bristol and then the cutting. And you can see that you're going to be using a thumbnail process just like you've used up to this point to create a composition, and then the composition then you're going to recreate with paper that you cut and paint. So you're going to execute a design that utilizes 5 units of different values that are conceptually linked. So what that concept is up to you, but just make sure that they are conceptually linked to one another. You're going to explore your concentration structures through your sketches and thumbnails, and then design and present a final concentration structure. So you're going to be doing, to a point away from a point, to a line away from a line. And what you need to do is start off with a concept, and you want to select an image that is either copyright free, or you can work from a real object like in front of you and make a drawing, or you can take your own photo to use to build your concepts. But these are kind of like the options you have. Again, copyright free imagery is kind of important from a design point of view because if you start with somebody else's image and you make something that's really good, you couldn't technically use that for anything where you might be showing it to somebody as your own work in totality, you'd have to talk about where your image came from. So it's a good practice to get into now, so that you can avoid that. So these are kind of like your image source options. You're going to create 10 1.5 inch by 1 inch thumbnails and different variations of your forms, about 15 minutes total for all 10, okay? As usual, pencil and sketchbook, and then create 5 2.5 by 2, total time maximum 30 minutes, and then 2 6 by 4.5 thumbnails, maximum time for both is an hour. Use pen or marker. You have the markers with the different values, and now is when you're going to start to utilize them. You want to use the markers with the different values to show how you're going to distribute value through your composition. And then you're going to create one 12 by 9 inch sketch in pen or marker that explores your structure. You're going to try to make this as similar to your final as you can. So you want your final to match this as much as you can. This is supposed to be your guide. So what we're going to be doing is we start to move into value here. So value is the relative lightness or darkness of something. Value is one of the 3 components to color, as you learned in Mansell. The value makes up the rod and the axis of the color system that Mansell created. For Mansell, values range from white to black, with white being 10 and black being 0. So if you created a value scale, which would be like 9 little boxes or 10 little boxes next to one another that had different values to them, you would have small increments of value between white and black. And then the idea being when you squint your eyes at it to activate the rods in your eyes. So the rods in your eyes see value. So when you squint your eyes, you actually activate them more. So when you would look at your 10 little squares of value next to one another and you squint your eyes, it would look like they were just blending. That's kind of the idea of a value scale. If you look at your markers, you're going to see that you have all these values, but some are actually, they look a little bit more purple than others. That's because the temperature of the black that is used in those grays is a little bit of a different temperature. But we're just thinking about value, so we're not really worried about the warmth or the coolness of the value. So what you're going to do is you're going to create a sketch, and you have to use 5 different values. So you'd use 5 different markers. You cannot use white and you cannot use black. So you have to use something between a 9 and a 1 on the value scale. And you're going to use 5 different values in total, and then you would create your final sketch to look like what you hope your final composition will look like. So here's a final design that shows you kind of like our final outcome, what we hope will be the final outcome.